I managed to get my hands on a set of these. These are the AVODA Origin Black set of irons, and they do look absolutely gorgeous. So I've got these AVODA irons in the black heads, and we've also got some Fujikura Axiom 105X shafts. I've got the lob wedge up to the 4 iron, but I'm going to be testing the lob wedge, 9 iron and 5 iron for this little test. And in the longer irons, we've got a bigger body, wider sole, more forgiving, higher launching head. And then we go into the middle of the irons, and we've got this kind of like CB, extra bit of weight down the bottom here, not as much as the long irons. And then we go into the wedges, and it's more like a pure blade. It's very much a progressive set of irons. I've got this 5 iron, 9 iron and lob wedge, and they are all exactly the same length. And we've also got some Jumbo Max extra small grips. Now they say extra small, but they are not very small. They are quite big compared to your normal grip. Now this is weird having such a long lob wedge, but this blade sits really nice and tight to the turf. There's not much gap here underneath, but it does look really tidy at address. So the thing I've always found with one length irons is that we get a longer shaft than normal in the shorter clubs, in the more lofted clubs. And that generally makes the ball launch higher because the shaft is longer, it's got more room to bend and release and launch the ball higher. So I do tend to find that a lob wedge in this goes very high. I kind of want to see how high, because they're saying, AVODA are saying that they've sorted that out. They've sorted that kind of like separation out. And then when we get to the longer irons or the less lofted irons, they launch really low. So I'm going to compare a few shots to a normal set of clubs just to see whether they are leveled out or whether they are actually all right in terms of peak height and launch angle. And then distance as well. Distance is going to be a factor that comes from those elements. But one of the big hypes about these irons is that Bryson DeChambeau won the US Open using a set of clubs designed and made by this company. Now the irons that DeChambeau had bulge and roll on the face. This is flat. And when I looked into it, that bulge and roll on the face is only made for Bryson and only made for marketing. Now to get the benefit from the bulge and roll on an iron, you need a huge amount of ball speed. And quite frankly, if you don't have that ball speed, you're not going to get the benefits from that bulge and roll. Hence why you can't find them at retail. Now this is largely very nice. It's going at the target quite nicely. It does take a few swings to adjust to the concept of the one length. It does take a few swings just to nestle into that big difference in how the club is presented to the ball compared to normal. But I like it. Nice. So we might see a massive increase in spin on a lob wedge compared to a normal wedge because of that extra speed that you get from a longer shaft. I can't argue with what's happening there. Now if I go to my standard lob wedge, 60 degrees, same loft, big difference in length. And I've chosen this one because it doesn't have much bounce on it. It does sit tighter to the turf, much to, well, in a very similar way to the AVODA. I now have to adjust to this because it's back to normal. Not bad. So with that little group there, I'm ignoring the first shots with each club because it's just giving me time to adjust to each one because of how different it is. Last three against the last three. I've got a peak height on the AVODA of 91 and I've got a peak height on my normal wedge at 76, much lower. The AVODA has more ball speed and the standard wedge has less because the shaft's longer. Launching higher, carry about the same. Okay, so it's higher, but it gives me the same sort of result. The dispersion there is 0, so my variance in those 3 shots is much tighter than a standard wedge. Interesting. Spin rates, I've got 11371, 11175. Spin rates are about the same. It's just that different characteristic in this height, which is the main thing I'm finding. So you can see here the peak height is much higher and the dispersion ring is tighter. I'd put a lot of that down to the Axiom shaft because the Axiom shaft is more stable, less twisty. I would normally expect that from an Axiom in general. Let's go into the 9 iron with that like cavity back, little bit of help. Generally speaking, in terms of where the weight is on a club, the more the weight is at the base of this club, the higher the ball will launch. And when we've got a bit more meat on the heel and toe, it stops it from twisting and resisting to off-center hits. The Axiom shafts will contribute to that as well because that stops it from twisting within itself. Not too dissimilar to a 7 iron. It is still an inch longer than normal. Felt absolutely solid, a little bit right. And it is weird having this taller posture with a longer shaft. It's about an inch longer than normal. Feels good, feels nice. I can't argue with how nice that feels and flies. Same again, a little bit right of anything. Seems to be launching in the same sort of direction, just hugging that left-hand side. Right-hand side even. And then rolling back in, cool. Oh, it does want to push. Because there's more mass to get through the ball, there's more length to get back to the ball. I would tune into that if I kept hitting them for a while and get used to it. Then the difference in length on a 9 iron. Actually, one of my really old videos went through the directional difference on grip size. I could be leaking that just right because the grip's bigger. Could be as simple as that. But stock 9 iron, standard length, lie, everything. That's more familiar. That's more familiar and I'm not having to adjust to it as much. Let's get a few of those in. Absolutely slapped it. Nice. Yeah, just the familiarity of it. I'd have to just use them for a bit to get used to them. So just taking out the worst shots in them, again, just because of that jumping from one to another. Peak height, 123 against 120. Fairly level on peak height there. A little bit faster with the AVODA. Same launch, more spin, probably coming from that speed. There's a bit of a connection there. 152 against 153. I was tighter tolerance with the standard iron, but that's still not bad at all. So at the 9 iron, they've leveled out a bit more. And I'm going to start this on a standard 5 iron, standard build. It's now longer than the AVODA. Now, generally speaking, you've got the likes of like Cobra that do 1 length, and I think they are okay, but I think we need a bit more time for the mass market brands to get better at getting the weight in the right place and leveling out the performance of the clubs compared to a standard set. Because again, I tend to see 1 length benefit those that hit the ball too high. They benefit on the less lofted clubs because that shorter shaft brings the flight down. But then they lose on the other end of the bag, and then vice versa. Someone who hits the ball too low, they win on the more lofted clubs because the extra length in the shaft brings that ball flight up. But when they get to the top end of the bag with the less lofted clubs, it gets their flight back down again and they're fighting their problems. There we go. Doink. Nice, launching in my normal sort of fashion. That was particularly good. So I've got 214 to the pin, which is the sort of club distance I would use this club from. Carrying 210-ish, maybe 205. I jumped out of that and hit it thin. Nice high draw coming into the green. And the main thing I like there is the height of the normal club. And then we go bang into this bigger cavity club it feels a bit more hybrid-y. It's slightly thicker here, it's a bit chunkier. All for good reason though, because it has to balance out the low nature of the rest of the build. Now instinctively I want to put that forward in my stance, but I know if I put it forward like normal, it tends to go left. So I've got to get that in the middle, so I'm kind of like approaching each one in the same way. Same sort of shape as normal, landing on the green, rolling out a bit. I think that's got a bit more juice than normal. Just want to see the height element of it. That does feel nice off the face. The head's a lot easier than normal when I've got the same cavity all the way through. This is more progressive, so I get more help at the top, which is sometimes needed. That's 3 routine good shots there. Bosh. So the AVODA here, the peak height is 95 and the peak height on my normal 5-iron is 105. A little bit higher, but not as much difference as I've seen in other clubs like the Cobra. I think AVODA have done a very good job at leveling out the performance of them compared to a normal set of clubs. They've done it with the size of the design progressively through the set. Spin rates are about the same. I've got a bit more spin and a bit more height on a normal iron. It's just lower and it's just lower. My average carry is 5 yards longer because it's coming off hotter and lower. The angle of descent will be interesting. So the angle of descent is shallower with the AVODA. It's coming in steeper with the normal iron. So I'm going to get more stopping power up here. I don't have as much stopping power here, which for some golfers is good. But I do think these irons from AVODA are the best same length, one length irons that I have seen to date. They're the best version of it. The data is just a bit out, just a bit lower in the lower lofted clubs, just a bit higher in the higher lofted clubs, but it is pretty close. In this set here, we've got the 4, 5 and 6 iron that are all that chunkier, thicker head. They've all got that extra little bit of help at the top, so 4, 5 and 6. And then the 7, 8, 9 pitch kind of go into that CB cavity back kind of area where they've just got a medium amount of help. Again, that kind of like helps level out this area of the bag in terms of normal height. The 9-iron, even though it was an inch longer, wasn't too far away from what we saw in the standard 9-iron. And then when we go into those wedges, they're more like a normal blade. They're more like what we see in a normal sort of like aftermarket wedge. They do have quite a low bounce. This does sit quite tight to the ground. But when you're hitting normal shots, we've got a bit more bend and release from the shaft because of that extra length. And when you get that bend and release, we present more bounce on the bottom of the club. This gets presented here more, which is why it's going higher, but we get more of this sticking out. So then when we hit a normal shot on the ground, like a little chip shot, I actually quite like this idea with chip shots because I can stand nice and tall and still reach the floor. I don't get too like close and careful and like stuck here. 7-iron length there, I can stand up, I can keep my posture nice and tall. I'm more likely to get to the base of that ball to help the ball pop up. I like them. And yeah, jump in the comments. Have you got a 1-length set of irons? Have you had a 1-length set of irons? What did you think? What did you find? Why did you stop using them? Why did you start using them? And let's have a little discussion around that. That's not as hard and difficult as I thought. But I'll see you all on the next video.